what I tried to do is just try to give a summary and give an overall idea about Vijayanagara Empire. Fine. So the first question is why Vijayanagara Empire and why City of Victory? Like, Vijayanagara Empire existed for 400 years down south. The more critical part is this empire actually was formed when most of the older empires in the south were actually breaking up due to the Islamic invasions. I mean, you had Islamic invasions coming from the north. The Islamic invasions had overrun most of the north. I mean, most of the kingdoms in the north were totally destroyed. It was totally taken over by the Islamic rulers. And they swept into the south, and south you had some particular dynasties like the Pandyas, the Cheras, the Kakatiyas. All of them were being destroyed. All of them also had to face the brunt of the Islamic invasions, especially Alauddin Khilji time and Malik Kafur. So just at the time when this Islamic invasion, when the Islamic rulers seemed set to completely take over the south and Deccan, that was the time Vijayanagara Empire came up. And for 400 years, it stood like some kind of what you call a bulwark, kind of resistance to the Islamic rule. The reason why Islamic rule could not fully penetrate down south and Deccan. And the reason was the Vijayanagara Empire. But the fact is, what I observed was, outside of south, unless people had come to Hampi, not many really had an idea about the Vijayanagara Empire. Not many really had an idea about the Vijayanagara Empire, and I don't blame them, because most of the CBS history textbooks I see it's hardly 1.5 page on the Vijayanagara Empire, and that's the reason why I came up with this book and series, so that people get to know of it. And I mean, what I've given is a very layman's viewpoint of Vijayanagara Empire. So that's what the focus of my topic was. The presentation is also going to be on. Fine. So the backdrop. So where did the Vijayanagara Empire come from? Before we talk about the Vijayanagara Empire, let's just look at what was happening before that. If you take the year, it was like 1001 AD. That is, what was happening was, if you take down south, you had 4 major empires. One was the Pandyas, who were in Madurai. The other one was the Cholas in Tanjavur. The other one was the Chalukyas, who were in Badami, which is in Karnataka. Hoysalas, who were in Halabid, and Kakatiyas of Warangal. And most of them had very flourishing civilizations, very flourishing kingdoms. They were very famous for their temples, for their pretty rich temples. So that was the time when India attracted attention all over the world because of her wealth. I mean, most of these kingdoms, though they were at war with each other frequently, they built up flourishing civilizations. Huge flourishing civilizations, pretty advanced civilizations, very rich and prosperous. And of course, that news spread across the world, that there was India, one of the richest lands. And that riches attracted one of the invaders, which was being Ghazni. Or actually, it was Ghazni is not his name actually. He was actually a province in Afghanistan. So Muhammad of Ghazni was one of the more famous invaders. He heard of this wealth of India, and he was the first one to attack India somewhere in 1002. Okay, so he defeated. He started sweeping through the north of India. First, he started with Jaipala, the Kabul Shahi ruler. Yeah, that was the entire northwest. That is the Afghanistan part. Once upon a time, it was pretty much a Hindu-Buddhist kingdom. Post the Muslim invasion, all those kingdoms were wiped out. It became a totally Islamic place, and that started with Ghazni. He defeated the Kabul Shahi ruler Jaipala, and then after that he started on the northern India. So by 1113, the entire north was overrun. All the major kingdoms in the north, they had fallen one after the other. Like the Tanesar, Madura, Kannauj, all the very famous civilizations, kingdoms which are there in the north, all of them were conquered or destroyed by the repeated invasions of Ghazni. And of course, I think most of you must be aware to some extent of Somnath. The Somnath temple, which was reputed to be one of the richest temples then, it faced repeated attacks by Ghazni. He plundered its wealth. He broke the particular Shivlinga also. And in fact, it is said that the wealth which he took from Somnath, he used that to build his own capital. So This destruction of Somnath, I mean, the repeated attacks on Somnath, and after Ghazni, the second Muslim invader who attacked India, that was of Ghori. And Muhammad of Ghori, again, like he made repeated attacks on India. Initially, he was repulsed many times by Prithviraj Chauhan. But what happened was like the Battle of Tarain. I'm not going to very much into details of all this, just give you a brief overview. In 1192, he had the Battle of Tarain, where he was betrayed by Jaichand. I mean, I think most of you must be aware of the story of Prithviraj, Jaichand, Samyukta. So he was betrayed by Jaichand. He lost the battle, he lost to Muhammad Ghori. And this defeat of Prithviraj Chauhan in 1192, in a way, laid the foundation for the Islamic rule in India, which was primarily the Delhi Sultanate. Fine. The first Islamic ruler, what we call as a slave dynasty, it was started by Qutbuddin Aibak in 1209. Basically, it was called as a slave dynasty because this Qutbuddin Aibak was working as a slave under Muhammad of Ghori. Later, he founded his own kingdom, which he called as a slave dynasty. And predictably, Jaichand, who betrayed Prithviraj, was killed by this Qutbuddin Aibak. And he completely conquered the entire northern plains up till Bengal. As you can see the map, if you can see the map of what is the Islamic rule, it was the entire northern plains and up till Bengal were completely conquered by the Islamic rulers around that time. And after the slave dynasty in 1290, you had Jalaluddin Khilji, who overthrew the slave dynasty. Who overthrew the slave dynasty and founded what is called as the Khilji dynasty. And Jalaluddin Khilji in turn was killed by his own nephew, that is Zuna Khan. His real name was Zuna Khan, and of course Alauddin Khilji. I think his name is pretty famous nowadays for obvious reasons. So here what happened was, till Alauddin Khilji, one thing is like everybody knows about Alauddin Khilji, Padmini and all, but another thing is, Alauddin Khilji, till then most of the Islamic rule was mostly established in the north. It was primarily established in the north, that is the Gangetic Plains, Bengal and Gujarat. Alauddin Khilji, what he did was, he conquered most of Rajputana, most of Rajasthan and all he conquered. And after that, he turned his attention towards the south and Deccan. Now these empires, these kingdoms once upon a time were one of the most flourishing kingdoms. They are also entering into their last stages. They are also entering into their final stages like most kingdoms. So, till in the 14th century, till then, the south and Deccan was relatively less affected. Compared to what was happening in the north, south was not that much affected by the Islamic invasions. But once Alauddin Khilji came to power, he started spreading it. And then the invasions came out. And of course, that was Malik Kafur, his eunuch slave with which he had that kind of relationship. He was the one who led that invasion down south. Malik Kafur, the eunuch, his slave, he was the one who led that invasion down south. Okay, and the first kingdom to fall was Devagiri, which was like the capital of the Yadava dynasty. The Yadava dynasty. So that was the first kingdom to be attacked. Its ruler Ramchandra was killed, and by 1293, the Yadava kingdom was destroyed. Devagiri is more popular to us nowadays as Daulatabad. If anyone of you has been to Ajanta Ellora, or Aurangabad, you must have seen Daulatabad. That was Devagiri in ancient time. That was Devagiri in ancient time. After the Islamic rule, it became Daulatabad. So, this Devagiri was captured by him, the end of the Yadava rule. After that, he went further south. You had the Kakatiya rule at Warangal, which is near to my place. 3 kilometers from, just like around 3 hours from Hyderabad. Warangal, which had this Kakatiya dynasty, which was again one of the more flourishing kingdoms in the country. That too fell to the Islamic invasion. That is in 1309, Warangal, which is the capital of Kakatiya dynasty, that too fell. And soon the Kakatiyas also came to an end. He swept further down, and then the Hoysalas. 1311 Hoysalas, Halebid. I'm not sure if anybody have been to Halebid or Halebid. Yeah, you must have seen the Hoysala dynasty. So that was the next kingdom to be overrun. And again, its ruler Veeraballala was forced to pay tribute, and he was actually killed in a pretty rather grisly manner. It was like actually burnt alive to death. Fortunately, what happened was, though Malik Kafur came up till south, he was checked by the Pandya rulers. I mean, after defeating the Yadavas, after defeating the Kakatiyas, and after defeating the Hoysalas, he came further down south to Pandyas who were ruling over Madurai and Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Fortunately, Vikram, a Pandyan ruler, he checked the Pandyan invasion. He managed to check this invasion of Kafur. But even then, Trichy, two major cities in Tamil Nadu, Trichy and Tanjavur, both of them were conquered, and there was heavy scale destruction. It was like a typical Muslim invasion. They would go everywhere. They would go. Either temples would be razed, or cities, towns would be massacred, exterminated. So it was that. So fortunately, Madurai was saved. Fortunately, Madurai was saved from the Khilji invasion, but Tanjavur and Trichy could not escape that kind of destruction. So why I am telling all this is because this is to give a backdrop of why the Vijayanagar Empire was actually significant. So as you can see, what was happening so far is the Muslim rule had the Islamic rulers had totally taken over the north. The entire Gangetic Plains, Bengal, Gujarat, maybe Rajasthan, yeah, still the Rajputs were there, but most of north was taken by them. Most of north and Bengal was taken by them. And the Deccan, that is starting from Maharashtra onwards, Deccan, south, it was still not completely untouched. But even by that time, at least most of the Deccan was also occupied by the Islamist rulers. Fine. And couple of more years, what would happen is, entire India would have been under Islamist rule with no resistance to offer. And this is the reason why the emergence of Vijayanagar Empire is very significant. So, as I told you, by 1330, the north was completely under the Delhi Sultanate, and all these great dynasties, the Cholas, the Pandyas, Chalukyas, once upon a time, of course, all of them were great dynasties, great kingdoms, great rulers, but like any kingdom, all of them had come into their final stages, and they could not face the invasion, they could not resist the invasion of the Islamist rulers, and most of them have suffered heavy defeats. The kingdoms are also ending. So it was that kind of crossroad situation. Where the Islamic rulers were totally threatening to overtake the south, just as the way they did with the north and the west. Fine. At the same time, what happened was you also had Muhammad bin Tughlaq. After the Khilji dynasty came to an end, you had the Tughlaq dynasty coming into the picture, and that was the time you had Muhammad bin Tughlaq coming as a ruler around the same time. And Tughlaq, of course, I think most of us, it's a quite familiar name because of his cranky ways. He's known for his very eccentricities and also his very cruel kind of behavior. He was a sort of enigma. He was very intelligent. On one side, he was supposed to be very intelligent, very learned, but he was also very eccentric, absolutely cruel, and of course, his pretty much disastrous policies. That's a different topic altogether. And here what was happening was now the dynasty is down, they already suffered heavy defeats under Alauddin Khilji. And now they are fearing what was happening if once the Tughlaq army comes, that would be the actual end of it. By now, most of these kingdoms were totally broken. All was left was for the final annihilation to take place. So here, that was the time there was some need for some kind of resistance or some kind of empire in the south, which could actually resist the Islamic rule. So it was like at the crossroads situation. All the old kingdoms were completely in their final stages of decay. So a new kingdom was needed, or a new empire was needed that could resist the Islamic rule. Fine. So, that is where the Vijayanagar dynasty came into the picture. The founders, now basically what was happening was, with most of these kingdoms falling, the people who belong to these kingdoms, be it the Hoysalas or Kakatiyas or the Chalukyas, they started looking towards an alternative. Some kind of common alternative that could resist the Islamic invasions down south and protect the essential nature of India, of civilization. And that was the time you had two brothers named Harihara and Bukkaraya. You had two brothers who were named Harihara and Bukkaraya who founded this Vijayanagar Empire. Fine. no, they were actually there are different theories about where they were from. Their father was called Sangama. In fact, one of the first dynasties, the first dynasty of Vijayanagar, in fact, is called as the Sangama dynasty. So there were a couple of different theories. Like as per one theory, these brothers were serving under the Hoysalas. They were serving under the Hoysala ruler Veeraballala III, and there was already one place called Hosapatna, which was where Vijayanagar Empire developed. I mean, that was one theory. That was one theory. Of course, there's another theory saying that the brothers actually served in the Kakatiya Empire. They were captured. They were captured when Warangal was defeated by the Khilji rulers and converted to Islam, and then they did a Garvapsi again. I mean, there is that theory also, but again, that theory. I mean, this theory again was more. It was more like from all these. You had these Muslim scholars like Farishta, Ibn Battuta. It was theory propagated by them. Again, historically, there was not much basis for a theory, though this is one of the theories floated that was the brothers. And finally, as per Sewell, they were the generally accepted theory is these brothers were in charge of the Kakatiya treasury. Harihara and Bukka, both of them were in charge of the treasury of the Kakatiya kingdom, and they also served in the army. So the generally accepted theory is once the Kakatiya empire fell, once Warangal fell to the Khilji rulers, these brothers escaped from there and they went to a place called Anegundi. Anegundi, if you have been to Hampi, it comes near to Hampi. And Hampi was on the left bank, Anegundi is on the other bank. So Anegundi, that time it was a pretty small, it was not a kingdom, it was a small principality a very small, minor principality kind of thing. So these brothers escaped to Anegundi, which is this is generally taken as this is the generally accepted theory of where these brothers had come from, though there are conflicting theories of it. So here, after Warangal fell and the Kakatiya dynasty came to an end, these brothers took refuge at the Raja. So Harihara was the minister, worked as a minister, and Bukka was the treasurer. Fine. So here what happened was, Muhammad Tughlaq's nephew was Bahauddin. So he made a rebellion against Muhammad bin Tughlaq. He rebelled against his uncle. And predictably, he fled once the fighting broke out, he fled to this Anegundi. He took refuge in this particular place, Anegundi, to escape from his uncle. So here what was happening was, once Muhammad bin Tughlaq laid siege to Anegundi. He laid siege to Anegundi, and the king of Anegundi knew that there's no way he could fight the Sultanate army, and he had to surrender Bahauddin to Tughlaq. There's actually a pretty grisly story, a very grisly story that Bahauddin, once Tughlaq captured Bahauddin, he first flayed him alive, cut him into pieces, cooked his flesh. Yeah, it's a pretty grisly kind of story. He was tortured and executed to death in the worst possible manner. Now, okay, fine. Now, coming to the point, what Tughlaq did, he put Naib Malik, Naib Malik as the governor in charge of that Anegundi. After some time, what these two brothers, Harihara and Bukka, did was, they overthrew Naib Malik and they took control over Anegundi. And in a way, that laid the foundation for Vijayanagar Empire. Okay, so there's actually an interesting story going that these two brothers, now they were the ones they were going for a hunt. There's a very interesting backtail to this, that these two brothers were once going for a hunt. Once and at a particular place, they saw that the rabbit was actually chasing their hounds back. Generally, when they're going for the hunt, they used to take their hounds to it. They saw that at a particular spot, the rabbit was actually chasing their hounds, actually giving chase to the hounds back. And that was the time they felt that there must be something about this place. There must be something special about this place. Again, this is more a bit of a myth or a legend, I'm not sure. But generally, this is like one of the stories that comes up about the founding of Vijayanagar. But what happened was, once they saw this, the brothers, they met their guru Vidyaranya Swami. So before we go into Vijayanagar, we need to know about Vidyaranya. Vidyaranya Swami was he is considered as the patron saint of Vijayanagar. So Vidyaranya Swami, he was the inspiration behind founding. He was the guru to both Harihara and Bukka. Both of them looked up to him sought him for spiritual advice or any other advice. So when they went and told him that this is what we saw, he advised them to actually, said that this place has got some pretty magical qualities, set up your kingdom there. Now, Vidyaranya Swami actually was belonging to what was called as the Sringeri Mutt. Like one of the 4 mutts which Adi Shankara established. I think you must be knowing that Sringeri, Dwarka, Badrinath and Puri. So, again, like Sringeri also has got its own sort of myth saying that Adi Shankara, when he went there, he saw a cobra giving shelter to a frog, and then, it felt that there must be something special about the place, and that's why he established Sringeri there. That's the story of Sringeri. So, Vidyaranya Swami, his real name was Madhava. So he became, when he took sannyasa, he undertook the name of Vidyasankara Tirthara, and in 1331 AD, Madhava, when he took sannyasam, he assumed the name of Vidyaranya. Vidyaranya basically means a forest of knowledge. Technically, it means a forest of knowledge. Fine. And this is what is, this is the temple of, this is one of the temples at Sringeri. If you can see, it is in a bit of a circular shape, the Sri Chakra shape. If you can see the temple, obviously, it's in a bit of a circular shape actually. If you observe the temple. The significance is this, that Vijayanagar was also built in the same circular shape. I think some of you must have had some idea about Sri Chakra. It's primarily used in Tantra. So Vijayanagar was also built in that particular form, that particular circular format of chakra. Fine. So here, So here, so apart from that, this Sringeri temple was Vidyaranya Swami was the one who initiated Harihara into what is called as the Atma Vidya. And the Vidyaranya Swami was given the title called as Karnataka Simhasana Pratishthanacharya, or the founder of the Karnataka throne. Okay. And personally, he was one of the greatest scholars in the Advaita philosophy. Vidyaranya Swami, he was regarded as one of the greatest scholars in Advaita philosophy. He also wrote commentary on the Vedas, the Vedanta Panchadasi. He was regarded as one of the highly regarded scholars. And that was the reason both the brothers, Harihara and Bukka, used to look up to him a lot. For any advice, they used to look up to him. So here, this is a very interesting tale of founding of Vijayanagar. So once their guru told that, fine, this spot called Vijayanagar is suitable for your empire, the brothers decided to found it there on the advice of their master guru. So what Vidyaranya do was, he prayed to Shardamba, or Saraswati. He prayed for the first time he prayed to her and said that, please grant us a kingdom, Hindu kingdom that is going to last for 2000 years. Okay, and then he told the brothers, he told both of them, both Harihara and Bukka, stand at a particular point. You take this particular point, both of you stand there. I'll blow the conch, then you start digging. What you call lays the foundation stone. Okay, so what the brothers waited for the signal, and when he blew that particular conch, they started laying the foundation. But what happened was, immediately after they laid the foundation, another conch sound came. The brothers got confused. Why is it that second time that sound is coming? Fine. And again, Vidyaranya is supposed to have approached Shardamba. She told him that, the time is not yet ripe for a 2000-year-old empire. But this was going to last at least for 200 years, though it lasted more than that. And she also made another prediction, apparently, that a 2000-year-old Hindu empire can be maybe established after another 500 years. That's what she told. So anyway, on the advice of their brothers, on the right bank of the Tungabhadra river, so the Tungabhadra river is there, on the right bank of the Tungabhadra river, what we call as Hampi, that is where the capital of Vijayanagar was started to build. And like I told you, it's in the form of a Sri Chakra temple. In the form of the Sri Chakra, if you take it, it's actually completely, it's like 9 gates, and you have three, four layers of wall. Right in the middle, you have the Virupaksha temple. If you go to Hampi, you can observe that it's basically built in a circular shape. Supposed to be resembling the Sri Chakra. And this, what you're seeing, is the Vijayanagar flag. What you're seeing in the picture here is the Vijayanagar flag of Vijayanagar that has the boar of that Varaha. That has the Varaha boar. and the sun, moon and the triangle. So this was the standard flag of the Vijayanagar Empire that used to be blown. Fine. Okay. So yeah. So like yeah. So now the first dynasty was called as Sangama dynasty, which was Harihara and Bukka. Again, I am going to just give you a brief overview of most of the dynasties because it is not possible for me to go in depth into everything. Yeah. So the Sangama dynasty. So this was called started by Harihara and Bukka. So apart from Harihara and Bukka, those are the main brothers. There were actually 5 brothers. I mean, there was Harihara, Bukka, and there were 2 more brothers. There were 3 more other brothers. That was the Marappa, Kampana, and Mudappa. All these brothers, these 5 brothers, were the ones who were in charge of the first dynasty. Fine. So and they had titles like Karnataka Vidya Vilasa, Bhashageta Progara, I mean Punisher of those feudatories who didn't keep their promises. And Vidyaranya Swami was the Rajguru. Vidyaranya Swami was the Rajguru for the kingdom. So he was the one who played the role of the advisor to these brothers, advising them on the kingdom and their responsibilities, what they had to do. So basically, if you take the foundation of Vijayanagar, 2 families played a major role. One was the Sangam, one was the Harihara's family, that is Harihara, Bukka and their 3 brothers. Other one was Vidyaranya's family. I mean, Vidyaranya's brothers, Vidyaranya himself was a Rajguru. His brothers also later played a major role in the founding of Vijayanagar. So these 2 families actually played a crucial role in the establishment of Vijayanagar Empire and its foundation. Fine. So yeah, so Vidyaranya Swami had his brother Saina. So Saina became the Rajguru to Sangama tree, who was Harihara's nephew. And so here, while Harihara and Bukka looked after Vijayanagar, the brothers looked after different regions. Like Marappa administered what is called Chandragupti. It's a place called Chandragiri near Tirupati. If you go to Tirupati, it is pretty close to Tirupati. Kampana governed over Nellore, which is coming primarily in the coastal Andhra region. And Mudappa looked after the Mulbagar region, which is primarily in Karnataka. And on the other side, like I told you, Vidyaranya, one was like Sangama, who was looking after Sangama, who was like primarily looking after the eastern provinces, that is primarily Andhra and the coastal areas. The other brother of Vidyaranya was Bhoganatha, who was the Jagadguru of Sringeri, who was the main Jagadguru Acharya of Sringeri. So, in effect, like these 2 particular families played a major role in the founding of Vijayanagar and its growth. So, for 1343 AD, Harihara passed away. Now, generally, Kampana should have been the natural successor, being the second son. But again, like this was one more feature of Vijayanagar is there was no natural law of succession. Generally, what happens was like generally the elder brother or the second, if he passes away, the next brother takes part. In case of Vijayanagar Empire, it was like depending upon the capability. It was not seniority that determined; it determined the capability, or who had the more power. He became the next ruler. In this case, also it was the same. Bukka was actually the 3rd brother, not the second brother. After Harihara, the second brother was Marappa and Bukka was the 3rd. But Bukka here was second in command. He was like Harihara's right-hand man. So he had the more power, he had more experience. So he was the one who became the next ruler. Now there was a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing was people got selected. I mean, the one who had the power also took over the throne instead of just making it based on the what you call seniority age. The negative side was the bloody battles for this. The negative side was, obviously in the later stages, there were a lot of battles for the battle of succession that broke out. And some of them are pretty much Game of Thrones kind of plots. Because of this, obviously there's going to be friction that, I deserve the throne, but somebody else took over. So that was the negative side of it. And actually that became, in the later stages of Vijayanagar Empire, these continuous battles for the succession, became pretty much fatal to the empire. And that in a way resulted in its downfall also. Okay, but we'll come to that point later. After Harihara, not much is known about Harihara's rule. He had a brief rule. Bukka was the one who expanded his kingdom. around, so he expanded it all the way up till Kalinga. It's nothing but modern day Odisha, which is pretty much modern day Odisha. So most of the South Deccan and Odisha, most of the rulers or kingdoms who are down south, they knew that on their own they did not have the resources, they did not have the strength, they did not have the power to resist the Islamic invasions. So tactically they accepted the sovereignty of Vijayanagar. So it was like all of them, they saw Vijayanagar as the focus, as the alternative. And they all started gravitating, they all started moving towards Vijayanagar. They started accepting its sovereignty because they knew that, accepting it was a kind of beneficial deal for them. They would be part of the empire and they would also have a kind of protection against any future invasion. And that was the reason for Vijayanagar growing, because like as I told you, all the kingdoms, all the older kingdoms which are there had already fallen. People who are looking for a new kingdom, for a new empire, and this is how Vijayanagar emerged. So all the smaller kingdoms, they started moving towards Vijayanagar. They accepted, they were absorbed into Vijayanagar, or they accepted its sovereignty, and that's how the empire started growing. Nobody really, they felt it was beneficial. Okay. And like I told you, first is the defense against invasions from the north. The second one was the emerging Bahmani kingdom. So when I talk about Vijayanagar, its rivalry was actually more with what was called as the Bahmanis. So basically, when you take the history of Vijayanagar Empire, the history of Bahmani Empire is also, both of them come together, because the rivalry was actually between these two kingdoms mostly. Fine. So basically, like if you take the South and Deccan, what was happening was there were constant battles, mostly between the Hindu kingdoms among themselves, or between the Bahmani rulers and the Hindu kingdoms, and that is the reason why there were a lot of changes in the alliances and tactically. So let us just, so when you are looking at the story of Vijayanagar, we need to know a bit about the Bahmani kingdom also. Bahmani kingdom was founded by Alauddin Bahman Shah, whose real name was Hasan Gangu. It's actually, he said he was a servant in the home of an astrologer named Gangadhar Shastri in Delhi. Later he was general in Muhammad bin Tughlaq's army, and he became a governor down south. After some time, what happened was, like, after Tughlaq died, he broke away from the Sultanate. He established his own kingdom in 1347. And he took the name of Alauddin Bahman Shah. Hasanabad is like current day Gulbarga. So again by Bahman, generally one assumption is that Bahmani kingdom is a corruption of Brahman and all that. Again, it's not historically verifiable. People assume, that's one theory going around, that Bahman was corruption of Brahman and they've named it Bahman. But generally, the more accepted theory was he named it after the Iranian general Muhammad Jaddouhi. Bahmanis were primarily Shias. They're primarily Shias and were primarily of Persian origin. They're primarily Persian Shias. Okay. So the theory is that it was named, there was a general named like Muhammad Jaddouhi, who fought during the Arabs during the war. So they adopted the name of the dynasty, the Bahmani kingdom, for it. That is the generally accepted theory. And initially, this Bahmani kingdom was at Gulbarga, which is in Karnataka. So, if you take the next couple of years, there was a constant battle for supremacy, a constant rivalry between these two kingdoms, the Bahmani kingdoms and the Vijayanagar kingdom. Of course, there was a third player also in this, that is the Portuguese, but they come much later. But the primary rivalry was between these two kingdoms, the Bahmanis and the Vijayanagar. So, if you take a look at the map, okay, if you take a look at the map, the one in the orange here represents the orange color is the one which is representing the Vijayanagar Empire. The green and all the representing the smaller kingdoms, and the above ones, the above Vijayanagar are what you call as the Bahmani kingdoms, which is generally how the map of India looked during that time. Okay. So Alauddin Muhammad Shah, the first one. So if he, after that, he conquered up till Adoni, and he was succeeded by his son Mahmud Shah I. So the rivalry was primarily between Mahmud Shah I and Bukka. Not like typical Islamist invasions. The Bahmani rulers used to make regular raids on the Vijayanagar Empire. Every time they made raids on the Hampi, they used to either they used to destroy whatever temples were there, or and massacre the Hindus. It was a common feature. So that was like Muhammad Shah, like he played, first he attacked Warangal, okay, he then, Warangal, all the people, all the inhabitants were mercilessly slaughtered. And the prince was there, Vinayaka Deva, he was again killed in a very gruesome manner, like was tied and made into a burning catapult and, I mean, killed in a rather gruesome manner, like most of the cases. Finally, I mean, Warangal fell and became part of the Bahmani Empire. And the wars actually, Muhammad Shah won himself, he's estimated to have massacred around 5 lakh Hindus, the first ruler, and devastated most of the Carnatic provinces are the ones in Tamil Nadu. The devastation was so large that it took some time for those provinces to recover from the devastation. Devastation is in same thing, most of the major temples destroyed, or towns and towns were just razed to the ground, and in some cases there were forcible conversions. Fine. Yeah, this is what he said. You know, when he was like, this is what Muhammad Shah once said about that. It was ordered by the decree of providence and I have no power to alter it. When asked about why he was slaughtering and massacring all these innocent people, this is what he said. It was ordered and I have no power to alter it. Okay. And finally, I mean, there were different battles. Again, I'm not going to go into in-depth details of the battles because there's a lot involved in the battles. But one of the critical one was the Raichur Doab. Like you had one of the two major rivers which you have down south, are one is the Tungabhadra and one is the Krishna river. So between these two rivers, you had what is called as the Raichur Doab region, which was pretty fertile, very strategic, and most of the major battles were fought for that particular Raichur Doab. And again, between Bukka and Muhammad Shah I, there was, for the control of this Raichur Doab, there were a lot of battles. And again, it was a seesaw where sometimes Bukka Rai win and sometimes Muhammad Shah I win. Okay, fine. And he also tried to capture Vijayanagar. He tried to capture, that is Hampi itself. Almost for a month he laid siege to Hampi. Okay, but what happened was, like, again there was a very fierce resistance from the Hindus and they bet him back all the way across. So though he managed to capture some of the areas around Hampi, he could not capture Hampi itself. One more thing, one of the reasons why most of the Muslim rulers found it difficult to capture Hampi was the region. Like, most of it was pretty rocky and there were 4 to 5 lines of defense. So it was very difficult for them to penetrate to the defense. And being a rocky area, it was easy to do that ambush attacks. So after this, what happened was, after Muhammad Shah died, he was succeeded. His son Mujahid Shah came to the throne. He wrote to Bukka saying that, you just restrict yourself to up till Tungabhadra river, all the forts on that, give them to me. Fine. Bukka shot back saying that, no, we are not doing that. You vacate the entire Doab. You vacate the entire Doab and also Raichur Mudgal fort. Predictably, again there was a constant battle between these two. So what he did was, he again, like his father, he laid siege to Hampi. He attacked it, but he felt that, bringing a siege of Hampi was not productive because it was not possible to defeat them there. So he tried to bring them out into the open. He said, if we bring them out in the open battlefield, it's easier to defeat them. What he did was, there's a very rich temple near Hampi. A very, very rich temple near Hampi containing a lot of precious stones and jewels. He attacked the temple, started looting all the precious stones and jewels. Okay, so once the temple was attacked, the Vijayanagar forces came out of Hampi and they attacked him in the open. And actually, in the open warfare, he was having the strength. So initially, what was happening was the Vijayanagar forces were on the verge of losing. Just then, however, Kampana, the brother of Bukana, came in time and he bet back the Mujahid, and Vijayanagar was fortunately saved for that time. So soon, later Mujahid himself was killed by his own uncle, and within Bahmani kingdom itself, there were a lot of internal dissensions going around between the nobles and the royalty, and taking advantage of that, Bukka managed to recapture most of the areas back. Okay. Other one was, like, at the same time, one of the other feature was the Madurai Sultanate, which was further down south. Madurai Sultanate was carried by his son, the son Kampana. Okay, there's actually a famous book called Madurai Vijayam on this. Fine. So here there was near Madurai there was a place called Tondai Mandalam. So that ruler actually, there's a ruler called Champaraya, was initially defeated by the Bukharaya because of the rivalry between them. So Madurai till then was under the rule of the Muslim ruler, the Sultanate rulers. So Kampana, he turned his attention to Madurai, and soon, I mean, in a very fiercely fought battle, he managed to capture Madurai, recapture it back from the the Sultanate rulers, and soon Madurai, Srirangam, and the surrounding areas became part of the Vijayanagar Empire. And his exploits, this Kampana's exploits in Madurai, his wife wrote a book called Madura Vijayam in Sanskrit, which was primarily deals with this particular phase. I mean, his war against his war to recapture Madurai from the Islamist rule, and he also captured Goa, Odisha. So you can see, if you can see the extent of Vijayanagar Empire, you can see that it covers a major part of the south. It covers almost entire south and a major part of the Deccan. You can see the extent. You can see the extent of the Vijayanagar Empire, and they also had control of the coastal areas too. That means that they had the access to the trade also. Fine. After Bukka, his son Harihara came to the throne. Again, Harihara had to deal. First, he had to deal with revolts. I mean, there were revolts by some of the feudatory, the smaller rulers against the Vijayanagar Empire. He had to subdue the revolt. Same time, again, Bahmani kingdom had its own internal dissensions breaking out between the rulers and others. So what happened was, taking advantage of this, Harihara captured Raichur. He captured the entire Goa. He had captured Goa, and the entire Malabar coast was captured by them, from Goa to the Kerala. So the entire Malabar coast was taken by Vijayanagar Empire. So, and that gave them a very strategic advantage, and also made it a trading power, because they had the entire west coast in their grip. The entire west coast was there in their grip. And after that, he captured the eastern part, that is the eastern coast also, the places like Kondavidu and Kurnool, Nellore. So both, the entire south was now under the Vijayanagar rule. Okay, and his son also went as far as Ceylon. Fine. And like as I told you, the major trigger for the conflict was the Krishna Tungabhadra Doab, which the Vijayanagar rulers were keen to capture. So they tried to, his son Bukka II tried to capture the Tungabhadra Doab, but there was a attack from the Bahmani ruler Firoz, and he had a narrow escape where he had to escape with his life from the Bahmani rulers. Firoz had a brother called Ahmed who took the head of Kamkanan, and just like his brother, used to make large-scale attacks on the south of Vijayanagar, destroying villages and imprisoning people. So finally, after a lot of raids and battles, Harihara agreed to some kind of truce with the Bahmani rulers for some time to avoid these constant wars and destruction were taking place. Harihara was also, like most of the Vijayanagar rulers, he was also a patron of literature. He patronized a very famous Kannada poet called Madhuraj Jain, who wrote a work called Vedas called as the Vaidakamaga Stapnacharya. And after his death, there was a period of confusion. There were a couple of weak rulers were there. The period of confusion, and then you had you had Devaraya I ascending the throne. He was not a direct successor. There was a big period of confusion and a bit of chaos there. Like there was internal battles, and then you had Devaraya I ascending the throne in 1406. Okay, initially he had a pretty inauspicious start. Initially, he had to face a very heavy defeat at the hands of Firoz Shah, Bahmani, initially. And he also had to lose a very strategic force called Bankapur, which is now, it's located in Karnataka now. And that was captured by the Bahmani rulers, and around 60,000 Hindus in that were taken as prisoners. So both these were pretty terrible losses. It was not the best way to start the empire. So again, he had to sue for peace. He had to, prevent this one. He had to again kind of signed a peace treaty with Firoz, and give his daughter to marriage to him to stop the wars and devastation. And here what happened was, in order to get out this humiliation, what Devaraya did was, he started forming a sort of strategic alliance against the Bahmani rulers. There was the Katayabema, who was a Reddy ruler, and the other one was Anandeva Choda, was a Velama ruler in Pedagomet. So he started forming a sort of strategic alliance with the smaller chieftains. He realized that on its own Vijayanagar army was having its limitations. So he started forming a strategic alliance with other smaller rulers to counter the Bahmani rulers. And there were other regions, so the Reddy Rajula of Rajahmundry, Recherla Padmanayaks of Central Telangana. So here again like actually this was like a bit of, I mean there was a bit of alliances that were going on and on again. See, because like there were different, though Vijayanagar Empire was expanding, there were these kingdoms like some of the kingdoms which I mentioned here, like the Recherla Padmanayaks and Eastern Gangas, and these kingdoms, they had no love lost with each other. So that's the reason why it was like one of the most pretty much a strife problem. There were constant battles either between the Bahmanis and Vijayanagar or between the Hindu kingdoms among themselves. And because of these internal battles between the Hindu kingdoms, some of them used to support the Bahmani rulers also. Some of them used to support the Bahmani rulers against other rival Hindu kingdoms. Okay, so like for example, the rulers of Kondavidu, which was one of the smaller kingdoms, they initially supported the Vijayanagar Empire. Now, when Devaraya started trying to ally with another Reddy rulers of Rajahmundry, because these Rajahmundry rulers were their rivals, they went and switched over to the Bahmanis. So, now we can understand how the Muslim rulers were able to, over in the constant battles between the Hindu rulers, taking the help of, siding with the Muslim rulers just to get even with their rivals. That was what was happening out here. I mean, this was what was happening out here. So, I think the picture is pretty much obvious. And this what happened was Padmanayaks, who till then were the allies of Bahmanis, they switched to Vijayanagar. So, as you can see, this is typical, pretty much a Game of Thrones, typical Game of Thrones stuff where allies keep changing. That was what was happening out here. So, finally, anyway, Devaraya managed to stitch an alliance. He first captured Panagal. And with the Padmanayakas, he soon managed to capture most of coastal Andhra. He managed to capture most of the coastal Andhra, Telangana region. And he managed to capture the entire Andhra, Telangana region. With all these, he made all these alliances. He captured it and brought it under the Vijayanagar Empire. Fine. Okay. Now, let's digress from the board a bit. Take a break from the battles and all. The greatest achievement was in the field of irrigation and water supply. Now, whenever everybody goes to Hampi, they see, yeah, it has great temples, great palaces and all. But one achievement of Vijayanagar Empire, which is not known to many, was the irrigation and water supply network. And this, I take, is one of the greatest achievements. Why? Because Hampi was in a very rocky region, which doesn't have any water. If you visit Hampi, it's a pretty rocky area. Just the Tungabhadra river is flowing there, but apart from that, there is no water source. And Tungabhadra is also not a perennial river like Ganga. It is like typical rain-fed river. So there was no consistent water supply. And so where was such a big, massive city like Hampi going to get the water from? Where was such a massive city like Hampi? It had to get water from somewhere. And that was one of greater Devaraya's achievement. See, he realized that lack of water, I mean, because of the lack of water, it was affecting the farming as well as the water supply to Vijayanagar. So here what he did, the first thing what he did was, across the Tungabhadra dam, he built a huge dam. He had the foresight to see that, storing the water. So he built a pretty huge dam across the Tungabhadra river. And, like he got elephants to transport the boulders, put them across the Tungabhadra river and build a barrage, and that helped to store the water. It helped to irrigate the fields. I mean, this was something pretty visionary. He was pretty visionary in those times, looking at storing water, conserving it. And like I told you, can see the picture. Like these are some of the canals that were in use. If you can see the picture here, these are some of the canals that were in use during Vijayanagar time that carried the water right into Hampi. Okay. Another major problem was the drinking water. Now, Hampi was like in a pretty rocky location, completely surrounded by boulders and all. Water had to be brought to Hampi. To satisfy the needs of its people, he had to bring water from the lakes and the rivers to Hampi. So he built a massive aqueduct. I mean, most of these are in ruins. If you can see the picture down, most of these aqueducts are in ruins. I mean, we know about the Roman aqueducts and all that, but unfortunately not much is said about the aqueducts built by the Vijayanagar Empire. which are an equally impressive feat of engineering. So he built those aqueducts. See, like Tungabhadra was around 24 kilometers away from Hampi. So he built those aqueducts, like as you see in the picture, that would bring water from the Tungabhadra river to Hampi all the way along, which was like a pretty great feat of engineering. This is pretty much impressive feat of engineering, supplying water to an entire city. And mind you, Hampi was not a small city; it's a massive city. So supplying water to these people in a region which didn't have water supply, which was completely rocky, that was a stupendous feat of engineering. Fine. And what he did was like this, during Devaraya's time, Hampi emerged, or Vijayanagar emerged as one of the largest cities in the world. Because of the regular water supply to Hampi, Vijayanagar, it soon became a flourishing center for trade and commerce. Because the water was coming, people could concentrate on the trade and commerce, and of course, like it helped the farmers around also. Fine. So this is one major achievement of the Vijayanagar Empire. See, this is like one of the major smaller canals. This was the canals inside the city. This was like the canals inside the city which actually flowed from one home to other home. Outside, the pretty much larger canals out here. I'm not exactly aware of the technical details of the dimension, but see, basically you had the larger canals bringing the water into the city, and then they fed it into smaller canals like this. So it was pretty much a very advanced kind of water supply system that was actually being built out here, as you can see here. Again, unfortunately, most of these canals and aqueducts are pretty much in ruins now. So you can just see some traces like this here and there, that's all. Aqueduct is not exactly a canal. It's a canal, but the difference is it carries the water above the ground. Your canal is like it's carrying along the ground. So the aqueduct is like the Roman aqueducts. You can say a kind of pipelines. And the reason why I tell you the aqueducts is built was Hampi, if you take a look at Hampi, it's built on an elevated location. So to bring the water from Tungabhadra river to Hampi, these aqueducts were needed. Yeah, the lifting water, again they were kind of advanced. They had a kind of gating system. They had a kind of gating system where where the water would flow into one lock into another lock, and then lifting into the aqueduct. I mean, I'm not that much aware of the technical details in that case, but there was that kind of locking system or gating system where they used to send the water from one chamber to another chamber, and then put it and lift into the aqueduct and build it along. It was actually not just at Hampi, actually if you go in many places in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana now, you have many old lakes, and all which are built by the Vijayanagar rulers. Especially in the surrounding area, that area called as Rayalaseema, which is a pretty rocky area. It's a pretty rocky and dry area. You have pretty of these huge tanks which are built by the rulers, essentially for saving the water. Fine. And apart from that, Devaraya was also a pattern of literature. I told you about Kannada poet. He was also patronized a very great Telugu poet called as Srinatha, who was the author of Harivilasa. So this is the picture of Devaraya felicitating Srinatha. Okay, he was called as a Kavi Sarvabhauma, and during his time there was a Pearl Hall at Hampi, where all the scholars used to meet. Basically, scholars, poets, all writers, all of them would meet at this Pearl Hall. So, apart from the fact that Vijayanagar was becoming a center for all the other kingdoms, it was also becoming a center for all the artists, scholars, poets, painters, sculptors. All of them, they started moving to Vijayanagar, and it also became the city. It was also called as Vidyanagar during the time, that is like the city of learning. So, as you can see here, if you can see what we are Vijayanagar was not just one big massive kingdom. It was also a civilization in its own, creating its own culture, its own art, its own architecture, which was a mix of every influences. Fine. And after Devaraya, he was succeeded by Devaraya II. And again, like in 1426, Devaraya, he became the ruler. And he captured the fort of Kondaveedu, which is like located in Andhra Pradesh near Vijayawada. And again, there was one more rivalry with the Gajapati rulers of Odisha, of Kalinga or Odisha, the Gajapati rulers. So there was again, that was another constant rivalry that was primarily for the control of the eastern coast. So so he managed to defeat the Gajapatis, he got back the territories lost, and also conquered most of Kerala, Ceylon, I mean, like most of Kerala was conquered during this time, right? Is right up till Quilon and up till Calicut. So during this Devarayara's rule time, it also extended from Kalinga. So Vijayanagar actually had the maximum extent from Kalinga to Malabar, from Gulbarga to Ceylon. And the other thing is like, it also meant that they had position of the major ports on the western coast, like Baktal, Mangalore, Goa. All these ports were under Vijayanagar rule. Because of that, what was they had a trading advantage also. Because they had control of these ports. I mean, and this was one area where the Bahmani sultans could never defeat them. That the coast was one of their strong areas, and because of that, the trade was flourishing for them. Fine. Again, again, I told you again there was the battle between the Bahmanis. Like Firoz Shah again attacked in 1419. Initially, there was a pretty intense battle fought, where the first the Vijayanagar forces counterattacked and sent Firoz Shah retreating from the battle. But however, Firoz's brother Khan Khan, he managed to repel the forces back. And Firoz's brother, he ascended the throne in 1422. So again, because he fought even the death of his loss of Panagal. So he again attacked Vijayanagar with a huge army. Same tactics again on his way to attack Vijayanagar. The same tactics what Ahmed Shah did was on his way mercilessly devastating the large tracts, same thing, destroying temples. It was the standard tactics by the Bahmani rulers. I mean, he was much like he, in fact, Ahmad Shah won. He made it a point that if in a place there were like more than 20,000 Hindus who were massacred at a place, he made it a point to celebrate that. Yeah. Around idols were broken. Vedic Pathshalas, the different Brahmin Vedic Pathshalas, they were desecrated. Obviously, there was bound to be a backlash against this kind of wanton destruction. So what around 5,000 Hindus, what they did was, they were enraged by what they saw as this kind of destruction and desecration, and they struck back. They struck back fiercely at Ahmed Shah I, and he had to undergo a narrow escape again back. He had to give up his plans of Vijayanagar. And after some time, of course, again he laid siege for some time. He laid a long siege, and again Devaraya too was forced to sue for peace. So after some time, again Ahmad Shah came by his son Alauddin, who again tried to conquer Vijayanagar. So here what was happening was till then what was happening was, though the battles between the Vijayanagar and Bahmani rulers were going in a seesaw. Sometimes the Vijayanagar rulers were winning, sometimes the Bahmanis were winning. But more often than not, the Vijayanagar rulers were facing constant defeats. They're massive defeats, and they had to give up large tracts of territory, wealth and all that. So that was the time they were to try to come up with a strategy on how to counter these Bahmani rulers. One tactic we did was, he took the care of the Arabian horses. He found that the Arabian horses which they were using were much more faster. They did not get tired out easy. So he started, because they had control over the ports on the west coast, they started importing these Arabian horses to be used in the army. The second advantage is the Bahmani forces actually had professional archers in their army, which the Vijayanagar forces lacked. They're pretty good at archery. So this was the disadvantage which Devaraya to try to overcome. So he actually, what he did was, he took the decision to recruit Muslim archers into the army. Because that time, and these Muslim archers in turn trained Hindu archers also. Okay, of course in retrospect, in hindsight, if you go into the later stages, you could see that this was it was not a very wise decision when you go into the later stages. But maybe due to the needs of time, or maybe due to compulsion, he had to take this kind of decision. It was not exactly a wise decision, but he had to take it. But in the short run, this move paid off. And it had but right now, he had a pretty strong professional army with around 80,000 cavalry and infantry. In the meantime, he had to face an assassination attempt by his own brother who tried to trade. There's a story where his brother calls him for his home to lunch, and he tries to assassinate him, and he escapes it narrowly, and his brother gets killed by those. So this was but one thing we need to notice is, in spite of the constant battles within the Bahmani rulers, Vijayanagar was kept on growing, it did not diminish in strength. And under Dev, it kept on growing, be it in be it in art and architecture, be it literature, be it trading, it did not diminish. They kept losing territories, but the empire was actually getting richer and prosperous more day by day. And they made great advances in architecture. They made great advances in architecture. They made great advances in literature. Fine. So here, two people who visited Vijayanagar during Devaraya II. One was Niccolo Conti, who was an Italian traveler. Other one is a Persian traveler named Abdul Razak. Both of them gave pretty glowing description of the city in their books, in their accounts. Like I told you, one of the major features of Vijayanagar then was like it had a pretty defense. I mean, like you had stone walls, there are large stone walls running around the city that kept out the invaders, which nobody could actually break in. This was the reason why Vijayanagar, till the Battle of Talikota, nobody could actually break into the city because of its pretty strong defense. It was pretty impenetrable kind of defense out here. Like I told you, which I showed you already, you had very elaborately constructed water canals that went right into the city. It irrigated the fields and also had pretty huge gardens. Okay, and like I told you, Abdul Razak wrote a very glowing account of Vijayanagar, calling it like one of the world's largest, greatest magnificent cities. Especially it had around the 7 walls around it, 7 different walls around it. Okay. Yeah, so like the 7 walls were, like one of the features, the 7 walls were there. The outermost layer was somewhere close to Hospet. Hospet is basically the base from which anybody wanting to visit Hampi, they get on at Hospet. That is from where most people go to Hampi. So that was where the first layer of the walls were there. Fine. I mean, basically the first, second and third walls were there. Fourth and fifth walls were basically, you had a place called Malpangudi. I mean, till today, this place has some of the pretty old buildings. If you go to Hampi, you can see them. Sixth place was near covered the Kamalpur tank. And apart from that, you had pretty huge bazaars. Okay. And Vijayanagar was at its peak, it was reputed to be one of the richest kingdom, where people actually used to openly sell pearls, diamonds, emeralds and rubies in the market. Like they used to actually, like how we have the Sabji Mandi, they used to actually they used to place those pearls and openly for display and sale. It had a flourishing trade in precious stones. And those bazaars were pretty much famous for it. People used to come there, they used to buy pearls like how we generally buy vegetables nowadays. They used to come and buy those pearls and all. It was such a rich kingdom. Preciously, so like diamonds, rubies and emeralds. And there was a Diwani Khana where, the king Diwan was the prime minister, would listen to the problems. And there was a Daftar Khana, which was primarily the sort of government office. Okay, where you had the government officers over there. You had a mint to the right of the palace and then the governor's home. Okay. And okay, one major feature of Vijayanagar Empire was the Maharnavami celebration. I mean, there were grand celebrations for other festivals like Ugadi. Ugadi was celebrated well. Deepavali was celebrated well. Ganesh Puja was celebrated well. But the grandest celebration in Vijayanagar was Maharnavami. I mean, because it was like believed that, it was being founded on a Vijayadashami day or something, they had that special significance for it. So, like here, I mean, you had elephants coming in from all corners of the empire, from different places out here at one place. So, you can just imagine, if you can just imagine the scene, elephants all over the places, richly decorated and all. And just for the sake of the Maharnavami temples, like you had huge pavilions erected just for the sake of the festival. Some going right up to 7 stories. Again, just imagine the scale and grandeur. And then you had performances by dancing girls, you had performances by jugglers, you had feats by elephants, and then you had fireworks, huge fireworks going upon. You had different games like you had wrestling, you had sword fighting. During this entire festivities used to last for around the 9 days. King used to sit on a throne. The king used to sit on a throne which was made of gold, that completely adorned with different pearls and diamonds and rubies. And from there he used to visit the Maharnavami celebration. Devaraya II himself had this sobriquet of what is called the Gajavitakara, meaning the elephant hunter. Apart from being a ruler, he was also a poet. This was again one more feature of most Vijayanagar rulers. They were great writers also. Apart from the fact that they were, all of them are good warriors and all, they are great writers also. And he wrote a collection of stories in Kannada called as Sobhagine Sone, basically where the author is narrating to his wife. Okay, so here what happened was, like, after the Devaraya died, which is primarily the end of the Sangaman dynasty, there was a period where it was completely chaos and anarchy. I mean, it was both in the Vijayanagar and Bahmani kingdoms. Both of them were undergoing their period of chaos and anarchy, with battles of succession going around. I mean, after Devaraya died, like I told you, that there was because there was no primary that rule that the emperor, the emperor's next born should succeed in. It often resulted in conflicts breaking out for the throne. Because they did not have the rule that only the son of the emperor should succeed in. Everybody would try to, fight for the throne, and which often resulted in all these dimensions. So, and during this time, during this chaotic period, it was not just the Vijayanagar Empire. 1458, Alauddin Shah passed away, and the Bahmani kingdom too started undergoing its own dissensions. So, it was actually the two major kingdoms were in a total unstable period, leading to complete chaos, complete anarchy everywhere. Okay, so I mean, you had so generally around this time you had Muhammad. You had a person called Gawan, who played a vital role in recapturing the western coast in Goa, and as again massacre of them. And so here what happened was the Bahmani Empire till then, it was pretty much a monolithic empire. Around this time, the Bahmani kingdom also broke up. Till then, it was pretty much a monolithic kingdom. It broke up into 5 different empires. So you had Yusuf Adil Khan, the governor of the Bija, who founded the Adil Shahi kingdom in Bijapur. Qasim Barid was prime minister under Muhammad Shah. He founded the Barid Shah kingdom at Bidar. Imadul Mulk founded the Imad Shahi kingdom at Berar in Maharashtra. Malik Ahmed Shah Bakri, who was the governor who established the Nizam Shahi dynasty at Ahmednagar. And Quli Qutub Shah in 1518, he established the Qutub Shahi kingdom in Golconda. So till then, the monolithic Bahmani kingdom was there. That also broke up into 5 different kingdoms: Bijapur, Ahmednagar, Golconda, Bidar, and Berar. Of these 5 kingdoms, Bijapur, Ahmednagar, and Golconda were the most stronger ones. Bidar and Berar were relatively minor. Fine. Around this time, what was happening was, to the constant conflict between the Bahmani and the Vijayanagar rulers, you had a third factor added into the picture, that is the Portuguese. I mean, till then it was the Bahmanis and the Vijayanagar rulers who were the 2 main players there. And then in 1497, you had Vasco da Gama coming to India with 3 ships, and who met the Zamorin of Calicut over here. And initially there was conflict between Vasco da Gama and all the native Zamorin rulers of Kerala. And in 1505, we had the other Portuguese ruler, Almeida, coming as the viceroy. So he realized that Portuguese interest instead of those constant wars, it was better to have a kind of trading in India. Okay. So around this time, you had this Italian traveler Vatama, who visited Vijayanagar. He wrote a very glowing account of Vijayanagar out here. And there were again constant battles between the Portuguese and primarily the Calicut Zamorins, and like we had one in 1505 and another in 1506. Now, the reason why I brought up the Portuguese is Vijayanagar Empire had a very strategic tie-up with the Portuguese. The reason why I brought up the Portuguese factor is they had a strategic tie-up with the Portuguese against the Bahmani rulers. The third player in the picture. So, and that leads us to the main ruler, that is the Sri Krishna Deva Raya. Now, every major kingdom has one great ruler. Like Marathas, you take Shivaji. I mean, if you take Gupta, Samudragupta or Chandragupta. So similarly for Vijayanagar Empire, it was Sri Krishna Deva Raya. I mean, after the Sangama rulers, you had the Tuluva and Saluva dynasty. Unfortunately, because of time constraint, I have to skip that. So Sri Krishna Deva Raya belonged to the Tuluva dynasty, and he ascended. He came to the throne in 1505. Basically, it's generally believed to be Krishnashtami day, and he proved to be the mightiest emperor of the Vijayanagar Empire. I mean, he had a pretty strong muscular personality, which used to exercise regularly. And he was, and also like as a warrior, he used to personally lead from the front. It was not like he never used to direct back. Every time there was a war, he used to go directly from the front. Fine. So Krishnadev Raya was the one who came up with this tactical partnership with Albuquerque, who was the governor of Goa, because he realized that they could be a front against the Bahmani rulers. So he came up with a tactical partnership with the Portuguese out here. And there were two advantages which he got from the partnership with the Portuguese. One was getting all the Arab and Persian horses. The other one was the Portuguese supplied the artillery. Bahmanis had good artillery. The Vijayanagar Empire, again, that was one area where they are lacking. So tying up with the Portuguese, they got hold of that artillery, which would be a very vital factor for them in the battles in the future. Okay. I'm sorry. And this, apart from the artillery, the Portuguese also helped in building these. You saw all those aqueducts and canal networks. The Portuguese again played a major role in strengthening all those aqueducts and canal networks in Vijayanagar. So here, the first what Krishnadeva Raya did was, the first challenge he had was from the Gajapati rulers of Odisha. So he first took his expedition against the Gajapati ruler. The first fort which he attacked was Udaygiri, which you can see on the topmost corner. Now, all these forts are actually, most of them are situated on hills, surrounded by thick fortress. It was not very easy to penetrate them. So, the first fort he attacked was Vijayanagar Udaygiri in 15, and out of a very long, 18-month long siege. As you can see, the fort is not easy to capture. It is on a hill, thick forest around, very steep ascent. So, he made a long siege, managed to find a secret entrance into the fort and capture it. And after capturing in Udaygiri, he visited the Tirupati temple. If you can go, if you have any of you have been to Tirumala, Venkateswara temple at Tirumala, those three statues were built in his honor. That is Krishnadeva Raya and his two wives. That's the picture is there at the Venkateswara temple in Tirupati. After that, he captured two other hill forts, that is Kondavidu and Kondapalli also. And that he made a very huge defeat to the Gajapati rulers. And there were two things here. The Gajapati ruler Prataprudra gave his daughter in marriage to Krishnadeva Raya, and it also brought an end to the conflict with the Gajapati rulers. So they became a kind of allies with the Vijayanagar rulers and them. Okay, the other important achievement of Sri Krishnadeva Raya with the Bahmani rulers. Till date, what was happening was there was constant conflict between with Vijayanagar and Bahmani rulers. With neither side actually not gaining a full victory. Sometimes they won, sometimes these won, and which was completely resulting in total devastation. Sri Krishnadeva Raya decided, fine, not this way. Give a decisive defeat to all the Bahmani rulers so that they'll never attack again. So he decided, he made a decision that to stop all this, the Bahmani army, they regularly used to make all those loot and raid tactics. Raid, loot, get back the wealth. He decided to put a stop to this forever. So first he went after the Adil Shah, Yusuf Adil Shah, who is the Bijapur ruler. Okay, and at the Battle of Diwani, he decisively defeated Yusuf Adil Shah in such a way. He also used to do one thing. When he used to defeat somebody, he used to take it till the end. There's no capturing. So he pursued Yusuf Adil Shah till the end, cornered him, and shot him down with arrows. So his mission was exterminate the enemy in such a way so that they never get the strength to hit back again. So Yusuf Adil Shah was defeated. So Bijapur was subdued. But Bidar was defeated. Next was he freed Muhammad Shah, the ruler of Bidar, put him to the throne. And Krishnadeva Raya had a very able prime minister called Timarasu. Okay, so he defeated Quli Qutub Shah of Golconda. He got back most of the territory. So he inflicted such decisive defeats on the Bahmani sultans that for some time till he passed away, none of them dared to attack Vijayanagar again. That was his major achievement. He actually put a complete stop to the Bahmani raids. Put a complete stop to the raids. They never dared to attack Vijayanagar till he was alive, because such was the fear he inspired, because he inflicted such crushing defeats on them. And like I told, his dream was called the golden age of Telugu literature. Now, Krishnadeva Raya was a writer himself. Apart from being a great warrior, great ruler, he was a great writer also. So he was, I mean, he himself was called as an Andhra Bhoja. He was called as an Andhra Bhoja because for his fluency in writing, and he was fluent in 3 languages: Telugu, Kannada, and Tuluva, which was his native language. Okay, and he was named as Narasimha Krishna. I mean, one of the titles he got was Narasimha Krishna Devaraya. I mean, his poet described him as the name of Narasimha Krishna Devaraya, at whose name the Turks quivered and the elephants ran away. Okay, so I mean, he patronized the Madhava scholar Vyasatirtha, who was like one of the trinity of the Dvaita Vedanta philosophy. And the Vyasatirtha was Sri Krishna Devaraya's Rajaguru, as well as the Kuladevata, who used to advise him on all the matters, both related to kingdom as well as spiritual one. Krishna Devaraya, I mean, apart from himself, like he patronized some other famous writers like Kannada writers, like one was Malanari of Gubbi, other one is Chatu Bidal Nada. And see, he himself was a very renowned writer. So this temple which you have seen, it's in a place called Srikakulam in Andhra Pradesh. Okay, it's believed that Sri Krishna Devaraya, one day on his expedition, he rested at this temple. The deity in this temple is called as Andhra Mahavishnu. I mean, he was believed to be a very powerful king. Incarnation of Vishnu was a very powerful king. So there's a kind of tale that goes that while Sri Krishna Devaraya was resting at this temple, he had a dream where Andhra Mahavishnu came to him in the dream and told him to write in Telugu. He told him to write in Telugu in the dream, and that was when he started writing. I mean, he wrote a book called, I mean, this is that statue of Sri Krishna Devaraya in that temple out here in commemoration. So he wrote a book called as Amakta Malyada. Basically, this is the story of Andal and Vishnu. This is the story of Ananda and Vishnu. It is considered as one of the magnum of considered as one of the great works of Telugu literature. Okay, and the other feature of Krishna Devaraya's court was the Ashtadhiggajas. Ashtadhiggajas are the 8 elephants. I mean, there's a belief that there are 8 elephants which actually hold up the earth in different directions. Like I told you, the names of Pundarika, Vamana, Anjana, and of course Airavat, the elephant of Indra. So these poets, 8 great poets in Krishna Devaraya's court, they were called as the Ashtadhiggajas. They are called as the Ashtadhiggajas. Okay, and of course each of them had their own individual style. One of the most famous poets was Alasani Peddana, who was called as the Andhra Kavita Pitamaha. I mean, the patriarch of Telugu poetry. And he wrote, his famous work is Manu Charitra. I mean, this is a picture of Sri Krishna Devaraya and Alasani Peddana. And Krishna Devaraya, in fact, revered Alasani Peddana to such a large extent that he often take that golden bracelet. That golden bracelet he himself would bend down and put it on around his leg. And there were times when he himself would carry the pallaki in which he was carrying. That was the reverence which he had for Alasani Peddana, the senior-most of all the 8 poets. The other famous poet which he had was Nandi Timmanna, who hailed from Anantapur district. Okay, he was also called as Mukku Timmanna because he wrote a lot of series of poems of Mukku. Mukku in Telugu means nose. So he wrote a series of couplets and poems on that. So that's the reason why he was nicknamed as Mukku Timmanna too. Okay, and one of his famous work was Parijata Paharnam, which is dealing with the story of Satyabhama taking that Parijatam plant from along with Krishna from the heavens. That story. The other one was Madayagari Mallanna. He wrote a famous book called Rajashekar Charitram, which is based on the legendary ruler of the Avanti kingdom. Other one was Durjati Kavi, who basically wrote most of the books in praise of Shiva. His famous one is Srikalahasti Mahatyam, a very famous temple town in Andhra Pradesh. Ayyala Raju Ramabhadra, who was called also Pillala Ramabhadradu. The other one was Pingali Suranna. He wrote a very famous book called Kalapurnodayam, where the first time you made use of techniques like flashbacks. And Ramaraju Bhushanadu, who was, apart from being a very famous poet, was also a pretty great musician too. He played the veena. And of course, Tenali Ramakrishna, which I think most of you would be familiar. Of course, while most of us are familiar with Tenali Ramakrishna as a jester or something, he was also a great author too. He wrote the Panduranga Mahatyam, basically the story of Pundarika and Vittoba in Maharashtra. and that is actually considered as one of the great Panchamahavikavyas, or what is the 5 great works in Telugu literature. So these Ashtadiggajs were the ones who adorned Sri Krishnadevaraya's court, and they used to daily meet in a session that they called as Bhuvana Vijayam. Bhuvana Vijayam means basically victory over the earth. I mean, even now, they keep holding recreations of this Bhuvana Vijayam, where these poets meet and they come up with the poetry. Basically, the poets would meet, they would come up with debates, debates with each other. Okay, yeah, let's come to the other part, the architecture part. Now, Vijayanagar Empire, I told you, it was founded by different styles. Like you had the Hoysala style, you had the Pandya style, and the Chola styles. Okay, and it had, so what we call as the Vijayanagar architecture developed in its own distinct style. It was actually basically a mix and match of all these styles, the Chola, Pandya, Chalukya style. And because it was located in a very rocky area, there was heavy usage of granite. There was heavy usage of granite in this one. And most of the temples, if you can see here, like there's basically they had a Garbhagriha, what you call it, the Sanctum Sanctorum. And then you had a porch like outside. And somewhat larger temples or medium-sized temple, apart from that, they had a chamber called the Sukanashi, or corridor which is connecting the Garbhagriha with the outermost mandapa. Apart from that, you also had a Rangamantapa, which was basically a huge hall that was used for dances and meetings. And one feature of these temples was the Raya Gopuram, if you can see here. A very common feature of most of the temples built during the Vijayanagar time, they are called as the Raya Gopuram, because they are usually built by the rulers of Vijayanagar. So they used to call them the Raya Gopurams. If you can notice the temple, the Gopurams, they're like pretty huge. Those Gopurams are pretty huge. I mean, they can be seen from miles around. And they're richly decorated with different statues of gods, goddesses, and other men and women. And of course, like you had the Pradakshina Patha for the devotees to go around. And the pillars had what is called as yalis. If you can take a look at the bottommost part, if you can take a look at the bottommost left corner, yalis were basically like sort of, horses with their legs lifted. So this was another very common feature of the Vijayanagar school of architecture. Okay. The other one was the mantapas, which you can see in the top left corner, basically built on square plinths with different freezers and entrances on all sides. Another common feature of most Vijayanagar temples was the pushkarnis, which are basically tanks, stepper tanks which are having the water, with a pretty symmetrical formation. So I can see they had a very advanced architecture. And I mean, even if you now go to Hampi, though most of it is in ruins, you can see that sort of brilliance they had in the architecture there. And the palaces which they had in Vijayanagar, the palaces, they had a very intricate system. I mean, you had doors, you had doors, passages leading into each other, and sort of secret passages way. Some of the larger palaces had pretty side extensions. And they also had water tanks with highly decorative sports, like basically elephants or yali sculptures. I mean, 2 famous sculptures from the Vijayanagar era. One is the huge Ganesha. What is the Kadalekul Ganesha? This is at Hampi. The other one is the huge Nandi at Lepakshi. One of the pretty large Nandi. I mean, these 2 are very famous motifs of the Vijayanagar era out here. Like I told you, all good things have to come to an end. So one of the greatest and richest empire in the world, someday it had to fall. And that was that the end was coming, which is actually one of the saddest part. So after close to 4 centuries, it was coming. Now, any great empire or kingdom in the world has to collapse. I mean, someday or other it has to decline or fall down. So the difference is Vijayanagar empire's collapse was sudden. Generally what happens, most kingdoms just slowly fall into decay. Vijayanagar empire was not done. It was a sudden blow, like a sudden death blow. It was like kind of blow that actually shattered it. And that actually makes it much more tragic. It actually makes it much more tragic. See, when Vijayanagar empire fell, it was still one of the largest empires in the south. Typically empires, when they fall, when they lose their territories, weaker rulers. But Vijayanagar, when it fell, was still the largest empire in the south. Okay, it still had a pretty huge army. It had a very thriving trade. It was still one of the richest empires in the south. Hampi was still one of the largest cities. Such a large city that when it was looted after the Battle of Talikota, it took 4 days to completely burn it down. So you can just imagine. It took 4 days to completely burn down Hampi. So you can just imagine such a large city, and even then that city could not be fully destroyed. In spite of the destruction, it still managed to survive. Okay. So what happened? Why did such a big, huge and massive empire collapse out here? Krishnadevaraya, under Krishnadevaraya, Vijayanagar Empire reached its peak, its zenith. He took it to the heights of glory like nobody else could. After he passed away, however, he did not have an immediate heir. Okay, so his younger brother Achyutadevaraya became the ruler. Unfortunately, he was not as powerful or strong as he was not as strong as his brother. He was not as powerful and strong as his brother. And here what happened was, the power lay with a person called Aliya Ramaraya, who was Krishnadevaraya's son-in-law. He was the power behind the throne. So he was the one who was controlling Achyuta Ramaraya. So here what was happening was, now once Krishnadevaraya passed away, the Bahmani sultans again gained confidence. Till then they were lying low, because till then they did not want to attack Vijayanagar. He passed away, they again got back their confidence. And so what happened was, first you had the Bijapur rulers who were like, they were the ones who first started attacking him, because they were the ones who suffered the heaviest defeats under Krishnadevaraya. So they first attacked it. And after this, what happened was, now with Vijayanagar, the Vijayanagar Empire itself in a chaotic situation, Portuguese began to assert their supremacy on the west coast. So on both ends, on one side the Bahmanis, on one side the Portuguese, on both ends Vijayanagar Empire was facing attack from both ends. Okay. And the Portuguese, apart from that, of course, they were pretty notorious for atrocities. Like, just like the Spanish Inquisition, you had something called the Portuguese Inquisition in Goa, as notorious as the Spanish Inquisition, where they forcibly converted many to Christianity, or many native Hindus or Muslims captured and tortured to death. Okay, that's a different topic altogether. But that happened around during this time. So here what was happening was, Aliya Ramaraya, what he did was he imprisoned Achyutaraya on his return from Bijapur. Now Aliya Ramaraya, what he used to do was, he committed two things. He would take the help of the Bahmani sultans in his own personal battles. That was bad enough. Even worse, what he did was, he used to constantly play off one Bahmani sultan against other Bahmani sultan. So what happened was, like I told you, you had 5 different Bahmani kingdoms, like you had Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmednagar. And these kingdoms used to keep constantly fighting amongst each other. What Aliya Ramaraya used to do was, he used to support one Bahmani sultan against other Bahmani sultan, for his own tactical purposes, which in hindsight would be pretty disastrous. Okay. So here what was, and apart from that, what Ramaraya did was, he started promoting his own family members, and which made most of the nobles turn around him. So here, with the constant infighting going on in Vijayanagar Empire, taking the help of the Bahmani empires. The worst thing is that they took the help of their own Bahmani empires, to settle their personal scores against each other. It was like, you could see it coming. It was something, you could see the destruction coming into the picture. So here, what Ramaraya did was, he would sign a peace treaty with the Bahmani Sultan. He would settle the dispute. He would again go and attack them. Okay, or he would put one Bahmani ruler against other Bahmani ruler, which sort of used to annoy all the Bahmani sultans. So what this, and here, what happened was, sooner or later, something had to give. The Bahmani rulers realized that their constant fighting amongst each other was going to be beneficial to the Vijayanagar Empire. They realized other thing also, that on their own they could not defeat the Vijayanagar Empire. On their own, either none of them could defeat the Vijayanagar Empire. So they decided to form the alliances. And that led to the downfall. So here what he did was, Adil Shah, the Bijapur ruler, he negotiated with Qutub Shah, Ibrahim Qutub Shah, ruler of Golconda. Okay, so what Qutub Shah he did was, he negotiated with Adil Shah and his rival, Hussein Shah. Mind you, Hussein Shah and Adil Shah were bitter rivals, but they still agreed to ally together for a common purpose, that was against Vijayanagar. So the three main kingdoms, Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmednagar, the three main kingdoms came together and they formed a common front to defeat the Vijayanagar Empire. And of course, again, they took the help of Bidar and Berar. So it was a 5-kingdom alliance against Vijayanagar. The first time in life ever, the 5 kingdoms came together. And they met at a place called Talikota. Which is which is currently in the Bijapur district. So here again, the second thing, Bahmani rulers were busy. They were planning their strategies, sending spies and all that. Vijayanagar rulers the Aliya Ram Raya took it for granted. They were just relaxing. I mean, they felt that these people attacked us so many times. What can they do to us? So they took it for granted that nothing is going to happen. They were pretty indifferent. And I mean, they took the so yeah, like Ramaraya, like what he did was, though he got reports that the enemy movements were coming towards Vijayanagar, he just dismissed them. He's saying that nothing is going to happen. They attacked us so many times. What will they do? And that was going to be a disaster. But I mean, nevertheless he put his brother Tirumala Raya in control of the Krishna River to ensure the Bahmanis were blocked. What the Bahmani rivers did was, they saw that the Vijayanagar army was blocking the Krishna River at one point. So they deliberately tricked them to believe that they were attacking from some other point. So the Vijayanagar army fell for the trick. They went to that particular point where they thought the Bahmanis would attack. And what these Bahmani rulers did was they crossed that particular point. And then January 23rd, 1565, the Battle of the Talikota, the battle that brought an end to the Vijayanagar Empire. I mean, so on one side you had the Vijayanagar forces, on the other side you had these 5 the Bahmani forces, which consist of Bijapur, Ahmednagar, Golconda, and Bidar and Berar. And the forces had 3 layers of artillery. I mean, they were pretty much equipped with artillery. So initially, for some time, the Vijayanagar forces initially were under heavy fire. But after some time, what happened was Venkatadri Raya, the brother of Aliya Ram Raya, he again attacked the Bahmani forces heavily. And Ramaraya, he was pretty much old. He was almost in his 70s. In spite of that, he still fought bravely. Against the Bahmani rulers. Unfortunately, this time, this is why I told that getting the Muslim archers into the army was going to be a disaster. It happened here. There was a couple of contingent of Muslim officers. They switched sides. Just at the crucial point in the battle, they switched sides. That's why I told you before. Getting Muslim archers in the army was like good in the short run, but in the long run, it was going to be a disaster, and it was proved here. So what happened was the entire contingent of Muslim forces, they switched sides with the Bahmani forces. 5,000 members of the Vijayanagar army were surrounded and killed. And it was over. And Ramaraya himself was struck by a cannon shot. I mean, the elephant was struck, he fell down and was taken as prisoner. So a very tragic ending. He was taken to Nizam Shah. So he was given a choice of either converting to Islam or not. Ramaraya refused to convert and he was beheaded. The man who beheaded him was Ibrahim Quli Qutub Shah. Again, another irony here. Quli Qutub Shah had a bitter succession battle with his brother. So he escaped from Golconda, and when he came, he took refuge in Vijayanagar. And the person who gave refuge to him was Ramaraya himself. But when it came to the final reckoning, he was the one who been. I mean, a very bitter and tragic irony, if ever there was one. And with the death of Ramaraya, the Vijayanagar forces became demoralized. They retreated from the battlefield, and soon it became a total rout. So it was apparent that Hampi would be falling. So what Tirumala Raya did was, he took the royal treasure around 1,500 elephants. He carried that to a place called Penukonda. It's in Anantapur district, the second capital. And most of the soldiers, chieftains, they abandoned Hampi. But even then also, people felt that nothing would be happening to Hampi. So out of the 3 days, the date on which the Bahmani forces entered Vijayanagar, just see the irony of it all. January 26th. And after 3 days they entered it, and soon the destruction started. One of the greatest empires in the world. I mean, temples, buildings were broken, its treasures were looted, prisoners, people were captured. I mean, prisoners were taken. There was en masse massacre. For 3 days, for almost 3 to 4 days, entire Hampi was ransacked, burned, looted, pillaged, and after that, it never rose again. So, one of the greatest empires in the world, one of the greatest empires and civilizations in the world, came to an end in such a brutal and tragic manner. I say one thing, Jews have something. Jews, they have a motto. They call it as remember Masada. They say remember Masada, where a last ditch stand where all of them committed suicide rather than surrender. Something I say always, I say remember Talikota. I mean, it's one thing that not many people actually know what happened at Talikota, but if you know it, this is something that will never be forgotten, because like we can see what happened to one of the richest and greatest empires in the world, how it fell, how it was destroyed and razed. And after that, Vijayanagar Empire was never the same. It was like totally broken up, and that was the end of the empire.